Good afternoon to everyone. This is a session to talk about, well, you can see GCSE Psychology, and we're going linear. Unlike some other training sessions, we're going to start by the presentation, which is being recorded for yourself and other people. So I intend to go through that, this time without taking questions, but by all means type questions in. And then at the end of the presentation, which we aim for about half an hour, then we'll stop and take questions and answer as many as we can. Any that I can't answer, I can hand on to Edexcel. So we hope to be able to answer all your queries. I'll introduce myself. I'm Christine Brain. I'm Chair of Examiners for GCSE Psychology, and I know quite a bit about it. So if there's any questions, then do ask me. I will be turning over the PowerPoint, and the PowerPoint is going to guide us through this initial presentation. Firstly, though, you heard John mention polls. I thought it might be nice if we just started by seeing who we are in the audience. So the first poll just asks you whether you already teach psychology. Hopefully you can see that on your screen. And if you wouldn't mind voting, I think you can tick any of these answers, any that apply to you. Let's hope you can see it. I'm not sure you can. Let me check. It's not totally important, so we won't worry if not. Okay, I'll close that for now. There we go. So, first of all, we're going to look at GCSE reforms in general, as you can see. And then I want to look at psychology, the core, and how we set the specification and so on. Then look a bit more about how the linear affects GCSE psychology. And then finally, a bit about resources and the end of the session. And at that stage, then we'll move towards question and answer. So this first slide, which I hope you can see, looks at the GCSE reforms in general. You will know anyway that the GCSE has been changed, and we are going to go linear instead of modular. So I'll start with these bullet points. In order to turn our specification into a linear one, then it means examinations are taken at the end of the course, stating the obvious, but that's the important point. So 2-year courses that are going to start in September are going to be linear with no modules available. Now, I'm not sure how that affects you. I know quite a few people teach GCSE psychology in 1 year. So, of course, if you're starting in September 2012, but doing a 1-year course, then you can still take modules. So to clarify that, I think it's easier to focus on the end of the course. So when your candidates are going to sit the GCSE, cash it in, and actually have the GCSE, if that's going to be in June 2014 or later, then you will have to start the linear course. If they're going to cash in May or June 2013, then it's fine to keep going on the modular one. I'm sure we'll be saying that again, so that's the main point. Then I'll go down the bullet points here. You can see that there's a special mark for spelling, punctuation and grammar, which will be done for English literature, geography, history and religious studies. That doesn't involve psychology. We'll still have spelling marks, the sort of quality of written communication marks, as we always have, but nothing different, nothing in addition, the same as we've always done. Units cannot be resat before cash-in. That's going to be the linear. This is the one where candidates are going to cash in, take their GCSE in May or June 2014 or later. The idea is just to have the exams in the summer series. So the June 2012 is going to be the one where the cash-in is important. And in January 2014, sorry, I'm going to say that again. June 2014, I'm sorry. So January 2014, there won't be any modules available. And we've got a graph in a moment to show that more clearly. And the other thing is about controlled assessment. That's the 5th bullet point at the bottom of this slide. As we don't do controlled assessment in GCSE psychology, then I'm not going to talk more about that, but it's worth flagging it up just to show you that's there. Hopefully that's okay. Turn to the next slide. This is the graph, the diagram that I've been talking about. There's information on here that we don't need, but let's go through it all, hoping to make everything clear. I'll try not to mention wrong dates this time, so I'll go slowly. Okay, so the first thing on this diagram is the first teaching of the last GCSE two-year course where you can actually use modules. And that started in September 2011. I'm just going to add a little bit there because I know GCSE Psychology can be taken over 1 year, perhaps by sixth form students or Wednesday afternoon electives, those sort of things. That may not apply to you, but it applies to some centres. So I'm going to keep emphasising that if the students are going to cash in and take their GCSE before May or June 2014, they can still use the modular assessment. Let's bring the next bit into this slide. So there you can see from November 12 until June 13, then this is, the entry is restricted. If you go any further than, for us, June 2013, this says autumn there because English language is taken in the autumn, but GCSE Psychology isn't, then those are the last dates in which you can enter for the actual modular GCSE. So here we go. This is the next bit on this slide. And you can see that we're going to June 2013 now. That's the final exam series with modular assessment. And that does apply to GCSE Psychology. So June 2013, you can add in the units you've taken. They can have been resat. It'll be the normal situation that we've got at the moment. I'm sure I'm saying this more than once, but it's just trying to be clear. This is the next bit on this diagram, November 2013. And since we're not doing November exams in GCSE Psychology, I'm going to leave that one and move on. Now we've got January 2014 and March 2014. Well, GCSE Psychology is having January exams at the moment. There won't be one in January 2014. June 2013 was the last assessment for the modular route. Then we've got some more on this diagram. You can see September 2010. This is for people teaching 3-year GCSE courses. It could apply to you, but I doubt it. And then September 2011. This is the teaching of a 2-year GCSEs that include the history, English, geography, and RS that I mentioned. That's not GCSE Psychology, so far that doesn't apply to us. If you started in September 2011 and you're doing a 2-year GCSE, that will end in May or June 2013, and it's absolutely fine to be doing that in a modular route. Let's see what else the diagram offers us. In September 2011, if you were taking a 3-year GCSE, which would end in that magic May, June 2014, you'd have to start the linear route. I'm sure that's okay. I do find it easier myself to focus on the May, June 2014. If it's ending then, it's linear. If it's ending in May or June 2013, it can still be modular. A little bit more, September 2012, an important date on this diagram, is the first teaching of the new linear GCSE 2-year courses. A lot of centres are doing the GCSE over 2-year, and we would be starting in September 2012. A little bit more, you can see about external assessment has just come up, and we're going to have 2 exam papers, exactly the same as we've got now, no controlled assessment, and there you are, that's telling you that you're going to have SPAG marks. We're not the group that are having the additional marks, which at the risk of repeating again, is English literature, geography, history, and RS. Nearly done with this, I think. Yeah. A little bit more came in there. June 2014, we said the GCSE is available as a linear exam. I'm sure I've said too much for you now. I think everything else that we said that's on that slide. Okay, a few more slides that talk through general points. Not many of them are going to apply to GCSE psychology, but I'm going to take you through them all anyway. That's okay. So this slide, minimal changes. It basically means very little has changed for GCSE psychology except the loss of the units, the modular route. So we got on that first bullet point, there's no plans to change the subject content of the specifications as a result of these reforms. They're not actually going to affect the actual external assessments, as I'm going to show. You can see an asterisk there and a draft stamp on this slide, but at the moment there's no plans to change it. Candidates will have to take all the GCSE assessments at the end for awards made from summer 2014 onwards. I've been saying May/June. A lot of it depends on the date of the exam, but that's what we mean, summer 2012. And the only exams you can take for the GCSEs will be in the summer. They'll no longer be offered in the January. I know the slide mentions November, but we never did it in November anyway. So basically for us, it's the loss of the January opportunities. And then another slide, the SPAG marks, the spelling, punctuation and grammar, that applies to English literature, geography, history and RS, so it doesn't apply to us. There will be questions where there is a mark for quality of written communication. I better make that clearer. Not an actual separate mark, but the question would be marked with that in mind, and we've already got those anyway in the papers. Let's move on to the next slide. Again, we've got a slide here that doesn't necessarily apply to GCSE psychology, because the whole slide here is about controlled assessment. In GCSE Psychology for Edexcel, we have two exam papers, Unit 1 and Unit 2. And the difference with the linear is simply that Unit 1 and Unit 2 will both be taken in the May or June, whichever the date happens to be, in the summer anyway. And that will be from 2014. Sorry, feel I'm repeating it a bit. And then a little bit more about GCSE reforms. We won't be able to carry unit results forward, but if you look at these two bullet points, then this again is about either single award to double award, which doesn't apply to GCSE psychology, or about the results of controlled assessments, and we don't have controlled assessment. I think for us it's quite simple. The linear will mean that there's no January units available, January modules I should say. It will all be taken in the summer. I'll summarize that at the end anyway. Okay, there will be performance tables. You might be interested. It'll still be the 5+ A stars to C of the GCSEs, including English and Maths. All qualifications will be equivalent to 1 GCSE. The vocational and academic qualifications will continue to be recognised. Edexcel certificates will be included. And there's an E-back, which is a performance measure, and you can see if they get C or above, or an accredited certificate for English, Maths, History or Geography, to the sciences, and an ancient or modern foreign language. GCSE Psychology is classed as an additional science, which is perhaps of interest. Okay, so I'm breaking away a little bit from the official slides, if you like, so that we can look at more at GCSE Psychology. I've divided this up. Hope you're all okay with this. I thought it would slow it down a little. A brief look at the specification, in case, I don't know how familiar you are with it, but just to reiterate really while we've got the chance. A look at the assessment, and then importantly, I think, section 3 of this, a look at the move to linear and how it might affect the teaching. And finally, some resources and some comments. And the last slide says question and answer, which will be our chance to answer questions. So firstly, the specification. So explaining the Psychology Spec, how we set about writing the spec might be of interest. There's specific areas the BPS ask us to cover in any psychology course, and that includes GCSE. I've written them down there: social, cognitive, developmental, biological, learning, and some methodology, which is basically how science works. This is an additional science, so we have to answer the core for the additional sciences as well. There are core requirements such as careers, science, that is how science works, and the psychology areas mentioned above, social, cognitive, and so on. And one important aim we had was to choose material that was sufficiently different from the A-level. We thought it would be nice if there was progression so that candidates doing the GCSE could still be interested in perhaps covering different material for the AS and the A-level. And importantly, we wanted to do what 14 to 16-year-olds wanted. We chose actually a lot of different questions that they might like answered, and then we surveyed them and did some focus groups and so on to find out which were questions that would be of interest. And we chose 5 questions, which I'm about to outline. Okay, we also like the idea of a strong structure for the specification. So for Unit 1, we've chosen issues about explaining the topic questions, which I'm going to outline in a moment, investigating the question, and why psychology matters. Unit 2 adds a little more to that. They're still explaining the question, investigating the question, looking at why psychology matters, but then exploring the question further. And you'll see that Unit 1 is worth 40% and Unit 2 60%. I'm coming on to that. So I've just come on to that now, haven't I? So Unit 1 is 40%. The 2 questions we chose there are: how do we see our world, and is dreaming meaningful? So in how do we see our world, we're looking at perception, schemas, things like eyewitness testimony. Obviously, I mean the unreliability of eyewitness testimony. When we don't see our world in a way like a tape recorder, but we use schemas and so on to interpret it. Is dreaming meaningful gives us a chance to compare Freud and a rather perhaps unscientific view, you might say, with case studies against activation synthesis, a biological approach. That is a way of getting how science works into Unit 1. Unit 2, which is worth 60%, has 3 topic questions. We look at TV and video games and their effects. We look at why people have phobias. And we look at whether criminals are born or made. And those 5 topic questions cover the areas of psychology we needed and the other issues. I hope I'm going on to say a bit more about that now. Let's hope it's clear enough. So Unit 1, in a little bit more detail, we've got the approaches that we needed, and in total we need social, cognitive, developmental, biology, as I outlined. And you can see we've got cognitive, developmental, and biological in Unit 1. Cognitive was perception. Developmental covers a little bit about Freud and how people develop. Biological, we've got activation, synthesis, and dreaming. We covered some methods, experiments that go well with the cognitive approach, and case studies that go well with Freud. We've got ethics, privacy and confidentiality in Unit 1. We've got applications, and we've chosen to look at eyewitness testimony and sleep disorders going with dreaming. And we've got careers, we've got the psychoanalyst there. And then Unit 2, to follow the same sort of pattern through, we've got biological, learning, evolutionary and social approaches to give them a breadth. We've got content analysis, questionnaire, and using animals in methods. We've got some different ethical principles, the protection of participants and so on, as you can see there. The applications are censorship, treating phobias, and joy decision-making, and the careers, EdPsych, clinical psychologist, and forensic psychologist. And the issue is nature-nurture. That makes sense when you put that back into the topic questions. A little bit more looking at psychology assessment. This is a brief overview. I don't know whether you're teaching GCSE Psychology Edexcel or not, and if you're not and you want to know more, on the website you will find presentations and a voiceover introducing it and so on, which you might find useful. Okay, so we've got assessment objectives, and AO1, AO2, and AO3. Probably I don't need to spend long on these. I've put the specification page number. You will have a copy of the PowerPoint to go with this online session, so you can have a look back. Basically, AO1 is about knowledge with understanding. We do emphasize it has to be knowledge with understanding, so not particularly rote learn knowledge for a lot of the questions, but answers that actually show an understanding. And it's looking at models and theories, explanations and terms and so on. All the sorts of things you'd expect. A little bit extra there, how psychology changes over time. That's quite useful looking at Freud and activation synthesis. AO2, we're doing evaluation, applying concepts, drawing conclusions, showing understanding. It says including contemporary situations. So we like to put scenarios and stimulus materials for candidates to answer questions about, sort of unseen material in a way. And then the impact of findings and so on, as you can see, on individuals and communities. Hence the emphasis on things like treatments of phobias or problems with eyewitness or jury decision making in a similar way. In AO3, this is all about how science works again, which for us is how psychology works. They can plan an investigation, understand methodology, look at qualitative and quantitative data, and discuss validity and reliability. So those are the assessment objectives. That's what we're asking questions to assess. So just a slide or two more on assessment. Unit 1 and Unit 2. Now these are the same whether we're talking about the new linear route or the modular route. They're both externally marked. They both have multiple choice and short answer questions. Unit 2, the one that's 60% of the whole, has extended writing more than Unit 1, the one that's 40%. Unit 1 is shorter. It's an hour and 15 minutes compared to an hour and 45 minutes. And Unit 1 has 60 marks and Unit 2 has 90 marks. Then that important bullet point at the end, where I've written available June only from 2014. The last available January is 2013 for cash-in June 2013. And Unit 2, available June only, that's not changed. It'll still be just available in June. The next section, I've just played with some ideas really and raised some issues perhaps about the move to linear. I think though, I wouldn't like to say these are perhaps as important as I've listed them. There actually is very little difference. The specification is the same. The exam papers will be the same. They just won't be offered in January. However, if you think about the scheme of work, there are ways in which it will change. For example, the candidates won't have a Unit 1, assuming they do Unit 1 first, a Unit 1 paper to draw on and to set their grades. So their predicted grade is quite firm by the time you've done an actual unit that counts, and they won't have that unit that counts. So that is a bit of a difference. And I just added some notes here to get thinking perhaps about the differences. So there's a few slides now that look at those. On the left is the modular, and on the right, the linear. Modular then, Unit 1, January or June, 40% of the course, assessed in less depth than Unit 2. By that I mean it hasn't got the extended writing. I've put there, no extended writing, around 4 or 5 marks perhaps, but longer than that there won't be, not on Unit 1. It's a useful starter unit, and that's what it's there for. The depth is the same, but there's 2 topic questions instead of 3, so there's not so much to learn. Then the linear, exactly the same for Unit 1, but this time the Unit 1 and 2 are taken together at the end, and the difference is Unit 1's not offered in January. The actual exam will be the same, the same structure, the same assessment. And Unit 1 is still going to be good grounding. Unit 2 is still going to be built on Unit 1. What is missing is the modular assessment. Some more ideas about linear, getting to the end. It's the same assessment as before. They can practice all the way through. Maybe a modular approach to building marks would be worth it. Breaking the course perhaps up into its 5 topic questions. There's less importance than doing it unit by unit, except for the exam, which will be separate. So the Unit 1 with the 2 topic questions will be a separate exam still, even though they're both in May or June. Perhaps assess each topic question internally so that the candidates have still got grades to rely on. You could consider teaching the elements in one go, and I'm about to explain that further. Just to hesitate for a moment to say that we have done a new scheme of work, a linear scheme of work that will be available or already is available, it's certainly already done, on the website. And that takes the current scheme of work that we've offered and has been on the website and turns it into a linear one by breaking the weeks up just a little bit differently to leave room for mock exams and different ideas so that the students can have the assessment that's quite firm for them and they know where their predicted grade is and where they're headed and what their level is. Sorry. Okay. So a little bit more, when I said you could break the elements up, you might decide to teach the methodology separately, method by method. The methods are listed there: experiment, case study, content analysis, or questionnaire. You might decide to teach the ethics separately, and we have privacy and confidentiality in Unit 1, and protection, using animals, and the ethics of using offenders in studies, in fact, in Unit 2. So you could consider breaking it up that way. I'm not sure whether I would, because it's entirely up to you. The scheme of work on the website is for you to look at and adjust entirely as you want to. It's for guidance and teaching. It's not us saying that's how you have to do it, of course. More ideas about teaching issues in the spec in one go. You could look at the studies. They could be taught in one go to compare them and to illustrate methods. Careers as well, they link together. So if there's an educational psychologist, forensic psychologist, clinical psychologist, and the idea is to look at the same areas for each of them, what qualifications they need, where they would work, what skills they would require. That could be put into a block. And nature nurture as well could be covered as one area. I would add, though, that the specification was written to build, and also so that it made some sense about the topic question. So when we're asking, how do we see our world, we're looking at the studies that shed light on that, such as Bartlett's War of the Ghosts, and how people don't remember it all. It's not like a tape recorder. And the methodology goes with it, experiments, cognitive psychology, and the topical issue goes with it. Eyewitness testimony, how we're guided by our schemas and so on. So these are just ideas. The role of the topic questions was to bring the specification together to make it make sense, which is why I think I'm saying, and we've kept on the scheme of work, doing the topics one by one. And after each topic, doing a short mock exam using a past paper perhaps. Theories and applications probably make more sense in answer to each topic question than learned separately. For example, if we look at the dreaming, we're looking at Freud's idea of dreaming, activation synthesis and a biological idea of dreaming. Then we're looking at sleep labs and psychoanalysis, and we're looking at case studies, especially Little Hands and the dreams in that case study. That all packages together quite nicely, and the ethics about privacy and confidentiality fit there as well. So I'm saying the theories are perhaps better linked to the topic questions, though this come after. If you separate methodology, ethics, studies and careers, you could then bring it back together under each topic question heading. This might be quite difficult to follow if you're not used to the specification, but as I said, you'll have this presentation and you'll be able to review it. Back to the scheme of work, the current scheme of work and the structure. We have some centres that teach over 2 years. I've put in the usual time slots, that's whatever yours are. That is where the important September 2012 date is that if you're doing it over 2 years, you need then to start looking at the linear course and not the modular one. Others have a 1-year course, 2 or 3 hours in one afternoon. Those people can go on with a modular course until they get to September 2013. The important date is May and June 2014. We plan the course to suit both these structures. I've put "and others." Any way that you wanted to teach it, you should find that the course works. It's quite hard to plan one scheme of work because somebody doing it over 2 years in a lot of small time slots would have to have a different scheme of work perhaps than somebody doing it over 1 year in one time slot. There's a 5 topic questions, about 30 weeks in 1 year, say. So for a 1-year course, that would be 5 weeks a topic and 1 revision week each. For a 2-year course, perhaps 50 weeks in all, so 9 weeks per topic and 1 revision week each. Those are the sorts of time slots that we've given when we plan the scheme of work. The scheme of work that's on the website that I'm talking about is a 2-year scheme of work. Obviously, if you do it over 2 years, you have more time to investigate and explore the areas. I'll just put on a little bit about teaching, thinking that it might help if you're already teaching the course. We found with theories that Gregson and Gestalt, that should say, Freud and activation synthesis do require a bit of thought, because I think the candidates do find them quite challenging to get to grips with, although they soon get into them. Studies, they quite enjoy the studies. They enjoy studies like Anderson and Dill that looks at playing video games. They have quite aggressive type video games, Wolfenstein 3D, and then they have a friendlier, more pro-social video game called Myst. And they found that the people that were playing the more aggressive video game were more inclined to give a louder blast of noise, that was a measure, than the ones that were playing a quieter one. That sort of study, the candidates remember. I think they identify with the whole idea. But what they do find difficult sometimes is remembering the right study for the right question. Methodology, I think we know that they're going to find independent and dependent variable and hypothesis and so on quite difficult terms. It's almost like learning a new language, quite scientific and something that needs to be looked at. Perhaps using words often, getting them very familiar with them. Careers, they actually do okay on careers. I think they quite enjoy looking at the careers, quite enjoy seeing what an ed-psych does, or a clinical psychologist, or a forensic psychologist, or a psychoanalyst. Perhaps they don't quite say enough, they don't quite write enough in general. Applying their understanding to unseen material, like explaining eyewitness memory, they actually do that quite well, but it still needs focusing on and practicing. Defining terms, stereopsis, always quite difficult. They're quite good at recognition, though. The multiple choice can work. It's good to practice using that. And extended writing is something that needs a bit of work on as well. They do brief answers, that was fine. Adding depth is often not done. That's just a general feedback. I've written in most of the above cases, it's not basic understanding that's a problem, but going into more depth for the higher marks. That's something that comes with learning the subject, I think. Areas that they found okay as far as we can see is that recognition is better than recall. Ebbinghaus in 1880s told us that, so we should know, I suppose. Multiple choice are quite well done. General answers about terms, actually, not bad, quite well done. Either explaining Gregory and the Muller-Lyer illusion, which is not an easy thing to do, and they do get that quite well. Understanding stimulus material at a sort of simple level, like what method would, I don't know, Sarah use if she was setting up a study. We've asked quite a few questions like that. If you look at past papers, you'll find those. And the description of some studies, they may be found easier than others. They do like Bartlett's War of the Ghosts. They do find the Palmer one sometimes a bit confusing, so that's perhaps useful for you to know. So looking again at the idea of the scheme of work that I've been talking about, quite obviously it's your individual decision. The specification is designed to make sense to the candidate, the linking the studies and theories, the methods and the issues and the careers, linking them all to these topic questions. Something like whether crime is born or made, criminals are born or made. So sticking to the scheme of work that suited a modular approach will work for the linear approach and should still make sense. Having a linear approach offers options that a modular approach did not offer. I've put C earlier because I was trying to say you could take all the methodology and have a good look at that, perhaps before moving on to something like the careers. Or you could look at all the careers, because they're quite different, really, from the methodology. Testing progress seems sensible, especially in the absence of the exams. Perhaps question by topic question, and that's how we've done the new scheme of work. We've built in a revision week and a mock exam week after each topic. And all importantly, the exams are still set as 2 separate units, just exactly as they are now. So we're coming near to the end of the presentation part now, and thank you for listening. This might help you, and as I said, remember you will have access to this. The subject advisor is Stephen Nugent. He's quite happy to hear from you. There's a phone number there for the subject advisor team, and an email for asking any questions, anything that concerns you. There's the Ask the Expert, which you might be already using. That would also be useful to ask about psychology or any of the issues I've mentioned, in fact. So if I've said something that's confusing, I don't know, about Bartlett, schemas, the War of the Ghosts, Freud, I've actually mentioned quite a bit of psychology. So do come and ask on Ask the Expert. You'll find that on the website. And it's an email service, so you email in and you get an email answer back. There's issues about keeping you informed there. There'll be a series of mailings so that you're kept up to date about the reforms and the changes from GCSE to linear. And the subject page, the psychology subject page, and there's the link to it, would also be able to give you more information. There's the resources. There's a teacher guide that goes with the specification. If you get the specification as a hard copy, you should have a folder which has the specification, it has a teacher guide, and it has the SAMs, the specimen answer papers, I'm trying to say. They give you specimen questions. And of course, we now have some past papers. The past papers come with mark schemes and examiners' reports, and they're worth looking at, obviously. The editable scheme of work is the one I've been talking about. We've had one anyway, so the modular one will be there. There also then is a new linear scheme of work. It's editable because you'll have your own ideas and your own special techniques and things that you use and lessons you prefer that you'll be able to put on there. A few websites we've come up with, they're not necessarily websites that are going to be brilliant, and they're probably not different to what you already know, but it gives you a starting point if you're starting GCSE psychology. There's also a progression document. That's a voiceover document available on the internet. It talks about going from GCSE to A-level, helps to show progression, and it raises quite a lot of points as well about the specification that you might find useful. Here's that list of internet sites. Psych Exchange, always good, as for teachers. Most teachers say that. Obviously, that's just my opinion, but do have a look, see what you like. There's DVDs there, various resources. I would mention that there's a news site called psychologyfaculty.org. It's all in one, Psychology Faculty. Those are podcasts. They're between 10 and 20 minutes, and they are, in a way, aimed perhaps at A-level. Some of your students might enjoy watching them. It might be something that you can use as a resource for discussion or to promote discussion. As well as those internet sites, we've also included another PowerPoint that's here. You can see it. It says handout, but it's written as a PowerPoint. And that's just some teaching ideas, just some ideas for learning, some ideas for mnemonics, some ideas that you might have that we thought you might find useful. And a summary. So I'm going to just slow down a little. So we're moving to linear. You must know that by now. English literature, history, geography, and religious studies are special in that there's marks for spelling, punctuation, and grammar. We are not in that group, although we do take into account the way answers are communicated. There's no plans to change the subject content. No plans to change the content of controlled assessments, and we don't have controlled assessments. Units are not resat before cash-in, and that's true for any candidate taking the exam in the summer 2014 and onwards. And the exams are restricted to the summer, but there still will be January exams for anybody cashing in and taking the exam, taking the GCSE, the whole qualification, in up to May and June 2013. It'll still be 5 A-star to Cs, including English and Maths. There's that EBAC performance, which I mentioned at the beginning, the specific subjects, which you could look back at if you want to see it. And there's that website there, the GCSE Reforms, for further details. If I've said anything there that is confusing, do remember to come back on Ask the Expert, or ask questions now, or ask questions of Stephen Ugas and his team, where we gave you the phone number and an email just a little bit earlier. And that's just for any questions. So I'm going to stop and see if there's any questions now. Thank you so much for listening.